At 8:17 on a Sunday morning, my mother turned 26 relatives against me before I had finished my first cup of coffee. My name is Hannah Mercer. I was 41 years old, sitting alone in my Denver townhouse, when the Mercer family group chat began vibrating so hard across the kitchen counter that it rattled against my ceramic mug. My mother, Diane, had written a long message saying I was refusing to release money from my late grandmother's trust for a wheelchair-accessible bathroom after her knee surgery. She called me cold, controlling, and more interested in rules than her own mother's safety. Then my younger sister, Brooke, posted a screenshot. It showed one sentence from me. "I will not authorize another dollar." She had cut off everything before and after it. Within minutes, Uncle Mark called me disgraceful. A cousin said Grandma Evelyn would be ashamed of me. My father wrote, "I never imagined raising a daughter who could behave this way." Even relatives who had not called me in years suddenly had opinions about my character. I stared at the screen with my thumb hovering over the keyboard. They expected one of two things. Either I would stay quiet and let their version become the truth, or I would react emotionally enough for Brooke to call me unstable. Instead, I opened a cloud folder they believed no longer existed. I selected the first of 11 screenshots and typed, "Before anyone decides who I am, please read what they planned." The screenshot was a message from Brooke. "Call Evan's restaurant debt a medical renovation. Hannah won't question it if Mom cries." The typing bubbles disappeared. For the first time that morning, the group chat went completely still. Before I explain what happened next, tell me in the comments whether you have ever been blamed by people who knew the full truth. And if stories about family betrayal, hidden evidence, and finally choosing your own dignity mean something to you, subscribe and stay with me. Because those screenshots did not expose one dishonest request. They exposed the role I had been trained to play my entire life. To understand why my family believed they could shame me into surrendering, you need to understand the Mercer household. My father, Robert, was a retired insurance manager who valued calm appearances more than honest conflict. My mother presented herself as warm and devoted, especially in public. At home, she controlled people through disappointment, silence, and carefully placed guilt. Brooke was 5 years younger than me. She was charming, impulsive, and always described as sensitive. I was the responsible daughter. That label sounded like praise, but it became a job. I earned good grades, followed rules, and started working part-time at 16. When Brooke forgot an assignment, Mom blamed the teacher for pressuring her. When I received an academic award, Dad pulled me aside and said, "Try not to make your sister feel small tonight." So I learned to celebrate quietly. The difference between us was rarely dramatic enough for outsiders to notice. No one locked me out of the house or openly said they loved Brooke more. It happened in smaller ways. I organized holiday dinners while Brooke arrived late and received compliments for bringing flowers. I drove relatives to appointments. I filled out insurance forms. I fixed tax mistakes. When an unexpected bill appeared, everyone looked toward me before anyone even asked. Brooke received comfort. I received responsibility. The only person who ever named the pattern was my grandmother, Evelyn. One Thanksgiving, she watched me clear 12 plates, while my mother praised Brooke for being the heart of the family. Grandma stepped beside me at the sink and said softly, "They treat you like the office manager of this family, Hannah, not like a daughter." I laughed because the truth embarrassed me. For years, I believed being useful was how I earned my place. Every problem I solved felt like another chance to prove I deserved the same tenderness Brooke received without trying. That belief eventually put me in charge of the one thing my family wanted most, Grandma Evelyn's trust. And her decision to name me trustee did not create the resentment. It finally gave that resentment something worth fighting over. After college, responsibility stopped being something my family praised and became something they assigned. When my father received a stack of hospital bills he did not understand, he dropped them on my dining table and said, "You're good with this kind of thing." I spent 3 evenings calling billing departments, finding duplicate charges, and arranging a payment plan. No one thanked me until the problem was gone. When my mother missed several credit card payments, I helped repair the damage. She told relatives she had handled it herself. Later, when I asked her to keep her statements organized, she smiled and said, Not everyone enjoys paperwork the way you do, Hannah. Brooke's wedding made the pattern impossible to ignore. She called me crying 2 weeks before the ceremony because the venue contract had the wrong guest count and the caterer was threatening to cancel. "I can't deal with this," she said. "You're the calm one." So I corrected the contract, negotiated the fee, redesigned the seating plan, and paid the remaining catering balance when Brooke claimed her bank transfer was delayed. At the reception, my mother raised her glass and praised Brooke for creating every beautiful detail. I sat beside an empty chair, knowing the flowers, timeline, and corrected invoices had all passed through my hands. A year later, Brooke and her husband, Evan Cole, opened Juniper House, a polished neighborhood restaurant with brass lights, dark green booths, and prices high enough to impress our parents. I reviewed their business plan before launch and warned them that their loans left almost no room for a slow season. Evan laughed. "That's why you work in compliance, and I work in hospitality. You see risk everywhere." When the restaurant began struggling, Brooke asked me for a temporary loan. Then another. She promised both would be repaid within a month. Neither was. At family dinners, Mom called Brooke brave for following her dream. She called me cautious, as though it were a character flaw. Dad joked that I had spreadsheets where other people had feelings. The jokes became less funny after Grandma Evelyn died. Her trust held about $310,000. It was meant for real medical expenses, education, and serious housing emergencies. Grandma named me trustee because she knew I would follow the rules, even when the rules made people angry. Her younger sister, Aunt Judith, was named trust protector, with authority to review disputes. Brooke heard the word trust and imagined an unlocked family account. The first time I asked her for receipts, she stared at me across my parents' kitchen island. "You know this is family money, right?" "It is trust money," I said. "That means every distribution has to match Grandma's instructions." Mom folded her arms. "Your sister shouldn't have to beg you." That sentence stayed with me. They did not think I was protecting something. They thought I was withholding what belonged to them. What they never understood was that my quiet life was much larger than the version they mocked. I was a senior compliance director for a national healthcare company. I investigated irregular payments, altered documentation, and internal reports that did not match the evidence. My family called it office work. They assumed I spent my days checking boxes and sending emails. In reality, I had built a stable career, owned my townhouse, maintained substantial savings, and had recently been offered a vice president position. I kept those details private because every achievement seemed to become proof that I could afford one more family emergency. My work had also taught me something important. Fraud rarely announces itself. It usually arrives inside an ordinary request, supported by a document someone hopes you will not examine too closely. That was exactly what happened when Brooke emailed me a $46,000 estimate for Mom's urgent accessibility renovation. The contractor's address belonged to a mailbox store. The estimate listed no measurements, no permit information, and no clear breakdown of materials. At the bottom, the requested payment account was linked to a company associated with Juniper House. "I did not accuse anyone," I replied, asking for photographs of the bathroom, a licensed contractor's assessment, and clarification about the payment account. Brooke called within 10 minutes. "Why are you making this difficult?" "I'm reviewing the request." "Mom needs help, Hannah. This isn't one of your investigations." Her voice was sharp, but underneath it I heard something else. Fear, and before the end of that day, a private message confirmed that the bathroom was never the real emergency. The private message came from Aunt Judith. She was 67, my grandmother Evelyn's younger sister, and one of the few people in our family who did not confuse peace with silence. Judith had spent 35 years as a school principal in New Mexico. She was warm, observant, and almost impossible to manipulate. Her message contained only 6 words. "Call me before you approve anything." When I called, Judith did not ask whether Mom was upset. She did not tell me to be the bigger person. She did not remind me that Brooke was under pressure. She asked, "Does the paperwork make sense?" "No," I said. "Then do not release the money." The certainty in her voice made me sit back in my chair. I had spent so many years being told that caution was cruelty that hearing someone treat my concerns as reasonable felt almost unfamiliar. Judith then told me something I had never known. Several months before Grandma died, Mom and Brooke had pressured her to give Brooke an early inheritance for Juniper House. Grandma refused, because Brooke and Evan were already carrying too much debt. Afterward, Mom began telling relatives that Grandma was becoming confused and controlling. "The same words they are using about you now," Judith said. A cold feeling moved through me. "They did this to her too?" "They tried," she replied. "The difference is, Evelyn saw it coming." Judith reminded me that Grandma had not selected me as trustee because I was easy to pressure. She had selected me because she trusted me when pressure came. Later that afternoon, attorney Naomi Brooks joined us on a conference call. Naomi had drafted the final trust amendments and understood every restriction. "If the estimate is knowingly misleading," she explained, "approving it could expose you to claims from the other beneficiaries. You need independent verification." She recommended a licensed accessibility contractor inspect my parents' house. She also told me to preserve every email, invoice, and text message. Judith's support mattered for more than legal reasons. She gave me permission to stop interpreting other people's disappointment as proof that I had failed. 2 weeks before Mother's Day, the truth began coming into focus. Juniper House was behind on rent, payroll taxes, and supplier payments. Evan had received a formal demand from the restaurant's landlord, but Brooke had hidden the problem from the extended family. One transfer from the trust, she believed, could keep the restaurant open and protect their image. Mom's knee surgery gave them the excuse they needed. The independent contractor inspected her bathroom and found that she did require safety improvements: grab bars, better lighting, a slight doorway adjustment. The full cost was less than $7,000. There was no need for the luxury reconstruction described in Brooke's $46,000 estimate. I emailed the family with the corrected assessment and offered to pay the licensed contractor directly for every medically necessary modification. Mom called me within minutes. Her voice was already trembling. "So now I have to prove I'm disabled enough for your approval?" "That is not what I said. You're making me beg for basic dignity. I approved the actual work, Mom. The contractor can start as soon as you choose a date." There was a pause. "We need the money transferred directly." That sentence confirmed more than she realized. Dad called next. "Families don't demand receipts from each other," he said. "Trustees do. You're embarrassing your mother." "No, I'm following Grandma's instructions." Brooke was less careful. "You know what happens if the restaurant closes?" she snapped. "Everyone will know you could have helped. I cannot use medical trust funds to cover business debt. I never said this was about the restaurant. You didn't have to." 3 days later, Brooke announced a Mother's Day brunch in the private dining room of my parents' country club. Nearly 20 relatives were invited. At first, I thought it was an ordinary family event. Then cousin Melissa called and quietly asked why I was refusing to make Mom's house safe. That was when I realized Brooke had already begun telling her version of the story. Months earlier, during a tense dinner, she had demanded that I delete screenshots of our family messages. "You document everything like we're criminals," she had said. To end the argument, I deleted the visible copies from my phone. Brooke did not know they had already synchronized to secure cloud storage. The night before the brunch, Mom sent one final message. "Approve the transfer tonight, Hannah, or tomorrow the whole family will learn what kind of daughter you really are." I read it twice. Then I placed my phone face down and refused. The next morning, before I had even changed out of my robe, she carried out her threat. At 8:17 the next morning, my phone began vibrating across the kitchen counter. The Mercer family group chat had 26 people in it. By the time I unlocked my screen, Mom had posted a photograph of herself beside the bathroom door with her cane. Under it, she had written, "I never thought my own daughter would deny me a safe place to recover." She said I was holding Grandma Evelyn's money hostage, punishing her over old resentment, and caring more about control than her health. Then Brooke posted a screenshot. It showed one sentence from me: "I will not authorize another dollar." She had removed the line before it, where I explained that the estimate appeared fraudulent. She had also removed the line after it, where I approved direct payment for every legitimate safety modification. The replies came immediately. Uncle Mark wrote, "This is disgraceful." A cousin said Grandma would be ashamed. Dad added, "I never imagined raising a daughter who would value paperwork over compassion." Even my grandfather asked me to reconsider before I broke the family permanently. I stood barefoot on the cold kitchen tile, staring at my name being passed around like evidence of a crime. My hands shook badly enough that I had to set the phone down. The old version of me would have called Mom, apologized for upsetting her, and transferred the money. I would have protected Brooke from consequences and called it keeping the family together, but the messages felt rehearsed. 3 relatives used the phrase, holding the money hostage. 2 called me cold and controlling. Brooke had prepared them. This was not an emotional reaction. It was an ambush. Then Brooke wrote, "Come to brunch and explain yourself in person, Hannah. Unless you know you're wrong." Mom followed with, "Silence will be treated as an admission." I called Naomi. "Correct the record," she said. "But share only what directly relates to the false request. Preserve everything." Aunt Judith was even more direct. "You have spent your life protecting them from the results of their choices," she told me. That has never created peace. After we hung up, I opened the secure cloud folder. The screenshots were still there. Brooke had watched me delete them from my phone months earlier and assumed they were gone. She did not know they had synchronized automatically. I restored every message and arranged them by date. The first showed Brooke telling Mom that Juniper House needed $46,000 within 10 days. The next came from Evan. "Submit it as an accessibility renovation. The trust allows medical housing expenses." Mom replied, "I can say the whole bathroom has to be rebuilt. Hannah won't want to look heartless after my surgery." Then I found Dad's message. "If the relatives think she is neglecting Diane, Hannah will give in. She hates public conflict." Brooke answered, "Once the money clears, we can say she's too hostile to stay trustee, and push Judith to replace her." They were not merely planning to take the money. They intended to use my compliance against me, then remove me before I could ask more questions. But the message that hurt most was from my mother. "Hannah has spent her whole life trying to earn approval. She won't risk everyone turning against her." I read it twice. My mother had always known why I stayed late to clean, fixed everyone's paperwork, paid forgotten balances, and swallowed insults. She understood the wound exactly. Instead of protecting it, she had built their plan around it. That was when my sadness became clarity. Naomi reviewed the screenshots and confirmed I could share the conversations I had been part of after removing unrelated private information. She also prepared a written summary of the trust restrictions. The independent contractor sent photographs, measurements, and the final estimate, $6,740. That amount had already been approved. The remaining $39,260 had nothing to do with Mom's safety. I did not argue with 26 people one message at a time. I uploaded the complete screenshot where Brooke suggested disguising restaurant debt as medical construction. Then I wrote, "Before anyone decides what kind of daughter I am, read what they planned. Full documentation will be presented at brunch with Aunt Judith and the trust attorney present. Do not delete your messages." For almost a minute, no one replied. My father went offline. Finally, Brooke wrote, "Those are private messages taken out of context." I closed the chat and went upstairs to dress. I chose a plain navy dress and the pearl earrings Grandma had left me. I placed the contractor's report, the trust language, and the complete screenshots inside a slim gray folder. I was no longer going to the country club to beg my family to believe me. I was going there to make sure the truth could not be cropped. The private dining room at the country club smelled like coffee, and the white roses Brooke had arranged around Mom's chair. Nearly 20 relatives were seated when I walked in with Aunt Judith. Brooke had placed my name card at the small table nearest the doorway, far from my parents. It was a familiar message delivered through folded linen and polished silverware. "You may attend, but you do not belong." The room went quiet when they saw the gray folder under my arm. Mom sat in the center, wearing a pale blue blouse and pearl necklace. Her cane leaned against her chair. Brooke stood behind her with one hand on Mom's shoulder, as if they had rehearsed the picture. Dad cleared his throat. "We should handle this privately." "You made it public," I said, "so I'm correcting it publicly." I placed my tablet on the table. Naomi appeared from her office, with Grandma's trust open beside her. Brooke laughed. You brought a lawyer to Mother's Day brunch? I brought the person who can explain the document you tried to misuse. Her smile disappeared. I passed copies of the contractor's report down the table and posted the complete message thread in the family group chat. Phones began lighting up. The full conversation showed Brooke explaining that Juniper House needed $46,000. It showed Evan suggesting they call the payment a medical renovation. It showed Mom agreeing to exaggerate the bathroom work. Then everyone reached Dad's message about using family pressure because I hated public conflict. He stared at the table. Brooke folded her arms. Those messages were jokes. People say things when they're stressed. Naomi's voice came through the tablet. The estimate requested payment through an account associated with the restaurant. The contractor listed does not appear to be licensed at the address provided. This is not a disagreement about tone. I removed the legitimate accessibility assessment from my folder. My mother's actual safety modifications cost $6,740. I said. Grab bars, better lighting, and a doorway adjustment. I approved all of it for direct payment. Uncle Mark looked at Mom. So Hannah never refused the bathroom? No, I refused the additional $39,260 intended for Juniper House. The silence changed. It was no longer people waiting for me to defend myself. It was people realizing they had been recruited into a lie. Mom's face tightened. Brooke was desperate. She was trying to save her family. And I'm your family too. She looked away. Dad leaned toward me. Hannah, let's discuss this after brunch. No. You used this room and that group chat to judge me. You don't get privacy only after the truth becomes uncomfortable. Cousin Melissa said quietly. Brooke called me yesterday. She told me what to write. Another cousin admitted the same thing. Brooke's composure cracked. You're enjoying this, she said. You always wanted to prove you were smarter than us. I wanted you to stop lying about me. You're destroying my business. Your business was already in debt. My evidence did not create it. Judith addressed the table. Evelyn expected pressure like this. That is why Hannah was appointed trustee, and I was appointed trust protector. Hannah followed the document. Naomi confirmed that disguising business debt as a medical expense could create civil liability and trigger a review of previous distributions. Brooke looked at Mom, then Dad. Neither spoke. I closed the folder. You believed I would betray myself before I allowed all of you to be disappointed in me, I said. That woman is not available anymore. I announced that all future requests would go through Naomi and an independent corporate trustee. I would no longer manage anyone's taxes, insurance disputes, emergency loans, events, or financial paperwork. Then I left with Judith. The consequences arrived quietly, through envelopes, phone calls, and records no one could explain away. During the formal review, Naomi discovered that an earlier trust payment of $6,800, supposedly for roof repairs, had partly covered a Juniper House supplier invoice. Future discretionary payments to Brooke were suspended until the money was repaid and the records corrected. Naomi sent a preservation letter regarding the false bathroom estimate. There were no police at anyone's door and no instant courtroom scene. There was simply a legal process that made it impossible to call the deception a misunderstanding. Juniper House temporarily closed. Brooke and Evan negotiated with creditors and sold their second vehicle to cover part of what they owed. Mom's real bathroom modifications were completed and paid directly to the licensed contractor. She could no longer claim I had denied her care. Several relatives apologized. Uncle Mark admitted he had reacted without asking a question. Others confessed that Brooke had contacted them before the group chat attack. I did not punish them. I simply stopped rescuing them. Tax questions went unanswered. Insurance forms were redirected. Holiday planning became someone else's job. For the first time, my family carried the weight they had placed on me for years. And when anger failed to bring me back, Mom and Brooke tried something different. They apologized. But every apology still came with a request. Mom's apology arrived 3 days after the trust review began. It was handwritten on cream stationery, the kind she used for thank you notes after Christmas. She called the brunch a painful misunderstanding and wrote that she was sorry I had felt attacked. Then she explained why Brooke had been desperate. Then she reminded me that mothers sometimes make mistakes while protecting their children. At the bottom, beneath her careful signature, she added, "Your father still needs help organizing the insurance paperwork. Please call him." I read the letter twice. Even her apology came with an assignment. Brooke left voice messages instead. In the first, she cried and blamed Evan. In the second, she said I had always wanted Juniper House to fail. In the third, she asked me to tell the corporate trustee that the false invoice had only been a communication mistake. Dad suggested we meet privately and agree never to mention the screenshots again. That was when I understood what all three of them wanted. They did not want forgiveness. They wanted the evidence buried, so the old arrangement could continue. With Naomi's help, I sent one written response. Trust matters would go through professional channels. I would not provide loans, tax help, insurance support, event planning, or reputation management. Personal contact could resume only after real accountability, without excuses or demands. Then I left the Mercer family group chat. Before leaving, I wrote, "I will not remain in a space where accusations are treated as entertainment and silence is demanded after the truth appears." Mom called the boundary cruel. I did not answer. For the first time, her anger did not feel like proof that I had done something wrong. 6 months later, my life was quieter. I accepted the vice president position I had nearly turned down because I was afraid my family would resent my success. I began leading a compliance team and developing training on financial pressure, altered records, and the ways manipulation can hide behind polite language. Aunt Judith and I became closer. That Thanksgiving, I sat at her table with friends, co-workers, and cousin Melissa, who had apologized without asking me to forgive her immediately. Everyone brought something. No one handed me a list of problems when I arrived. Brooke eventually repaid part of the trust money and began working with a debt counselor. Juniper House closed permanently. I did not celebrate. I felt sad for what it might have become, but I no longer confused sadness with responsibility. Mom's bathroom modifications were completed. The grab bars were installed, the lighting was improved, and the doorway was widened. Legitimate care had always been available. The trust was now handled professionally. I remained informed, but I was no longer standing between my relatives and every dollar they wanted. The screenshots did not save me because they embarrassed my family. They saved me because they stopped my family's version of me from becoming the truth I lived by. For years, I believed love was measured by how much inconvenience, blame, and pain I could absorb without leaving. I was wrong. One evening at Judith's house, I turned off my phone before dinner. The kitchen lights were warm, and someone else was carrying the plates. No emergency waited in another room. No one needed me to prove why I deserved a chair. If you have ever been assigned the role of family fixer, tell me in the comments what happened when you finally stepped away. Subscribe and share this story with someone who needs permission to choose peace. I was no longer my family's emergency plan. I was simply Hannah, and the people at that table were glad I had come.